All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. They'll be breaking down Alabama and Texas. The number one team in the country will head to DKR, Texas Memorial Stadium, to take on Steve Sarkisian and the Texas Longhorns. Fox will be covering this game, 12 p.m. Eastern Time. That's at 11 a.m. local kickoff. Pretty early. A lot of people are not happy this is an early day game, not a night contest. Over-under set at 61.5. Alabama, 20.5-point favorite. As of me recording this, I know a few days before that it was at about 16 or 17, so that's getting bet really high. Looking at this Alabama offense, 55-0 shutout over Utah State. Bryce Young, he didn't do too much through the air in terms of yardage, but he had 6 total touchdowns, 5 through the air against Utah State, 295 total yards. Also ripped off a 60-plus yard run, en route to 100, hitting triple digits through air and on the ground. So Bryce Young had a phenomenal effort there. Heisman Trophy winner from a season ago, obviously a very good player. I mean, what can you say about Young? He's only going to continue to get better and progress after that phenomenal season last year. He takes care of the ball. He's very smart, runs this offense, with ease. Hard worker, great teammate. Bryce Young, best quarterback in the country. Him and C.J. Stroud are up there, 1A, 1B. Only 10 touches in the debut for Jahmyr Gibbs. Figures to see an enhanced workload. As numerous backs got involved in week one, you've seen Trey Sanders get some looks. Rodale Williams, I know, was in the red zone getting opportunities. Jace McClellan, I think he was the most used back because he had a couple of receptions. 2 grabs for 25 yards and 2 touchdowns. Looking at receiver, though, we're wondering who's going to step up. Jermaine Burton, I think he's going to be unleashed in this game a good bit. He also had 2 touchdowns for 35 yards. He's got a lot of vertical speed. The rest of this receiving core kind of iffy. Some of those guys weren't unleashed in this game, but Trayshawn Holden was one of them, 70 yards, 2 touchdowns. Isaiah Bond had a few receptions. Kendrick Law. They got a lot of those freshmen involved. Kobe Pratis as well. So we'll kind of see who kind of emerges now that we're entering conference play here soon, but, an important contest on the road against a Power 5 opponent. Christian Leary, I didn't see it on the field. Ja'Cory Brooks, I don't know if he had a reception. I'm not seeing that he did. I'm not sure what his status is. And then Tyler Harrell, the Louisville transfer, we didn't see anything from him either. Plenty of speed there. I think they're going to kind of unleash some of these guys and that speed here against the Texas secondary that's going to have their hands full. Offensive line still progressing. I know Tyler Steen in his debut with the Vanderbilt transfer at tackle. He had some issues against Utah State. He wasn't exactly great. J.C. Latham got the start at right tackle. Kendall Randolph, he was inserted at left guard over Javion Cohen. So the offensive line, it was pretty poor last year for Alabama. We're going to continue to see what they do. This is not a tough matchup for them one bit, but, as they enter conference play, they're going to be playing better defensive lines each and every week. So that's going to be one thing to watch for them. How much tempo will the Tide like to roll with? Going on the road here to Texas Heat. Obviously, the Longhorns practicing this every single day, but, that doesn't make it easier, especially playing a talented, speedy offense that can attack you in multiple different ways. This is going to be a tough matchup here for the Texas defense, and I think tempo is something the Tide are going to look to roll out with. They can attack the interior. They can attack the outside. I don't think there's any real preference for them. I think they're going to win regardless on any of those different facets. Play calling from Bill O'Brien should be interesting, though. We'll see. They'll really, again, the biggest thing I'm looking for is see who gets the most usage at the skill positions. I expect Gibbs and Burton to be heavily utilized in this contest. Looking at the Texas offense, Quinn Ewers, solid debut. He got his toe. Quinn Ewers, solid debut. He got his car towed, but he had 225 yards, 2 scores, and a pick, 16-24 passing. This is a big test for Ewers, his second career start. Thankfully for him, it comes at home. But former number 1 recruit, impressive arm talent. This is a very tough matchup. I expect to see Alabama do a lot of different things with their defense in terms of stunts and coverages. They're going to look in the mix and match here. It's going to be, they're going to test the freshman quarterback, is my estimation, because this is going to be interesting for him to face this type of speed. This is NFL level speed and blitzes he will be facing, and you want him to pick that up on week 2, his second career start. So I think that's going to be a big thing for Alabama's defense. They're going to do a lot of crazy things that they're not going to be anticipating. And I think the best way to kind of offset that is you got to get the run game going. Great duo of backs, Roschon Johnson and Bijan Robinson. Alabama's defensive line, they're not exactly dominant on the interior like they used to be, but they do have those veterans we'll get to in a minute. But the offensive line is considerably outmatched, not just because of the interior, but the outside pass rushes for Alabama. Those pass rushers are really nasty. I expect Texas to attack the boundary to try and offset that problem, to free things up, because I got the receivers to do it. This is a deep receiver group. Xavier Worthy, of course, route running and speed. It's going to be utilized in some way. I do think the best way to attack the boundary is a lot of screens, quick passes, screens with running backs, that type of stuff. Jordan Whittington, he hasn't exactly been able to stay healthy, but is another guy that's been a contributor for them, and he can play running back as well, so he's a versatile, quick athlete. I liked the addition of Tariq Milton coming over from Iowa State. it's pretty good there. This receiving core isn't as deep as it was in the offseason. You had an injury to one of their transfers in Isaiah Neor. It's big because that's a lot of speed. But they have 3 guys right here that you can count on in Worthy, Whittington, and Milton to get job done. And Jatavian Sanders, he had a pretty solid debut for Texas as well at tight end, leading the team of 6 grabs and 85 yards with a score. So we'll see what happens with this receiving core. Alabama's defensive secondary, they're going to be hungry because last year they had some pretty poor outings. I think they're looking to make up for that. But I think the final thing they need to do is find a way to neutralize Will Anderson, because I do think they're outmatched on the offensive line. But if you can put 2 guys on him and use the running back and blocking formations to stop him or somebody else, whichever way you can do it, that's going to be key. Have 2 linemen double up on him, which I don't think is a good idea. Maybe chip him with a tight end. I don't know. Do what you can to try and neutralize Will Anderson, because he will make you pay. That quick get-off is no joke. So I think Texas offense, this is a good unit. I think they can put up some points, not in this game, just in this game, but all year long. And then that was obviously the biggest hype of Texas in the offseason, is what the offense would be able to do and what their defense would be able to give them to allow this team to win football games. Looking at the Alabama defense, just speaking of Will Anderson, I figured they have a good matchup edge here, and I think he's going to have a pretty solid game. 33.5 tackles for loss was the number from a season ago. 5 tackles, a TFL, had a QB hurry, and the 2022 season opener. So Will Anderson, obviously, he's huge. I don't believe Dallas Turner had much production, but both of these guys, they're going to be dynamite off the edge. You're going to unleash them in this game. You're going to have to find ways to account for both of them while also not getting beat on the interior, which is still a very iffy unit for Texas. It's got a lot of young guys. I see a freshman, a sophomore, and a redshirt sophomore on the interior for Texas, along with more freshmen. So it's like, at least for backups-wise, I think Kelvin Banks, I believe, got the start at left tackle. He's a true freshman. But your 2 deep is not great when it comes to inexperience. So Texas, they're going to have their hands full with these guys. Expect a variety of versatile looks. Try to confuse the young Ewers. It's something I already talked about. How much penetration, though, can the Tide force to kick Bijan outside? Bijan Robinson's lethal anywhere. But these guys are very speedy at linebacker and in the secondary, so they can kick him outside. It's going to be much easier to bring him down, because he can tear you apart on the interior as well. He's very slippery and smooth. Jalen Moody, a guy I'm happy stuck around. He's going to be big in trying to dictate things in the interior if this defense is kind of getting out-muscled. I don't expect him to. Guys like DJ Dale, Byron Young, Justin Ibiogibi, these guys are all seniors. They've been around a long time. And Jaheim Otis, he's getting some playing time at nose. He's huge. So a lot of size for Alabama, a lot of experience against an inexperienced offensive line. It's going to be a really tough matchup for Texas. Last thing, though, the secondary does face plenty of skill. That's one thing that's got to be respected here. We're expecting this secondary to be much better than it was last year. Guys like Jordan Battle, DeMarco Helms, senior safeties, Battle, one of the nation's best. Still kind of young at cornerback. Terrion Arnold, redshirt freshman, got the start last week. Kool-Aid McKinstry is still a sophomore. Eli Ricks, I don't believe, got on the field last week. Brian Branch, he's obviously great in the nickel, but so these 5 wide receiver sets will be interesting to see, because I think there's some areas of the secondary they can attack with the youth at corner. I mean, they're still really good football players, but overall, man-to-man coverage, I think that might be a spot they can win with guys like Xavier Worthy's. Like in the Texas defense, I was saying some of the same things about Texas last offseason that was this offseason, and that's, highly critical of the interior. That's highly critical of their defensive front. Baron Sorrell, he's stepped up in the opener. He's going to have a massive game, though. Lack of depth and talent off the edge is a big issue for Texas, and one they're going to have to address in the future, but there's not much there. Ethan Burke, Justice Finkley, 2 freshmen that are listed here on the 2 deep. That's all they really have. Tavondre Sweat at defensive tackle, Momo Ajbori. These guys on the defensive line, or at least on the interior, these guys are veterans. Keandre Coburn as well. They got some size and they got some depth there. Just a little bit of it, not a lot, but the pass rush, no, they don't have any. They were not good at getting to the quarterback last year. They're going to have to use Murray and Overshone and Jalen Ford a lot here in blitzes, at least in my opinion, to get after Bryce Young, because he's going to have all day in this game, because I do not trust this pass rush one bit. I don't think the matchup is, hard. The offensive line played last year for Alabama. I just don't have faith in the Texas pass rush. They were not good one bit last year. Baron Sorrell, I think he had 2.5 sacks last week in week 1. That's great. But he's going to have to carry that over here. See 2 tackles for loss and a sack and a half. So he's going to have to be big in this game. He's really going to have to be the tone setter off the edge. But, I think late in this game, these guys are going to be tired. The lack of depth is really going to start to show. And if it's still a contest in the 3rd or 4th quarter, you'll see Bryce Young just having a field day, because this pass rush is not going to be able to get to the quarterback one bit. The secondary last year, what their completion rate allowed was one of the nation's worst, and they allowed almost 70%. That was last year. So we'll see what happens with these guys when it comes to completing passes. That's not what you want to do because Alabama has the speed and the skill to really burn you after the catch. They don't return a whole lot. Anthony Cook, Deshaun Jameson, two veterans. Ryan Watts comes over from Ohio State. And that might be a good thing that they lose a lot of guys because last year the secondary was just poor in covering, communication. It just wasn't great. The safeties could not get downhill to stop the run. All those things are going to have to be fixed here in just a short time against Alabama, and I just don't see it happening. But the defense is pretty talented. Again, overshown solid. I think Ford's going to make his presence felt as a pass rusher. Keandre Coburn, he's big. He's kind of underperformed. But, the 6'2", 344-pounder, that's a guy that can really set things up for them on the interior against this Alabama offense. It's really good. Looking at the team comparisons, straight shot here, Alabama on everything. I don't really see how Texas could have an edge on anything. Maybe running back because Bijan Robinson's great, but Alabama's got the deepest backfield in the country, led by Jahmyr Gibbs, who's going to see an enhanced workload here. I don't really know what to talk about other than the offensive line for Texas. They're very young. Alabama's was quite poor last year, but I still give them the edge there. Linebackers for Texas aren't too far behind, but Henry Tioto, Jalen Moody, and if you want to consider the pass rushers as well, it's going to wrap things up there for Bama. In the secondary, they're much more talented, much more better too, really. Texas secondary had their struggles last year, and I think they're going to struggle in this game mightily. Straight shot across the board. Alabama has the edge on everything. Texas obviously has recruited very well in this roster over the years. I think will start to become very talented. But right now, this moment in time, nowhere near Alabama's. Looking at the keys to the game, my final thoughts on the prediction on this matchup. Bama use tempo to expose the lack of depth off the edge. I just talked about it with the Texas defense. That's going to be a big problem in this game. It's going to be a big problem all season long. That's why they're going to lose a handful of games that maybe they shouldn't lose, against a Kansas State and whatnot. These offenses that move us some tempo and, have that threat downfield, if a great quarterback like Alabama is really going to hurt a team that can't get to the passer, especially when their linebackers aren't too great in coverage. Texas established, long, methodical drives. That's one thing they need to do here to keep the Bama offense on the sideline. That's a great way to offset any defensive inefficiencies is to just have these long drives, running the ball, outlet passes for first downs, penalties even. That's the key to the game for Texas right there because the defense is not going to win them this game, but the offense can if they do it right. I don't see that happening. 52-21 for me. Texas, I think they'll score some points. They could even probably score more than that. The Alabama defense is a legit unit, but they did have their struggles last year, and I do think the young corners could be a problem for them against all this skill. But for me, I think Alabama's absolutely going to run this one up. They won't let off for 4 quarters, and they're going to have no problems beating Texas here, have them covering that big line of 20.5. It's probably more than that by now. But that's going to be it for today's episode, guys. Fun one in Austin. This could be an interesting game. Nick Saban against Steve Sarkisian. That's going to be it, though. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.